I hate billionaires, these stupid, grubby people that start businesses from scratch and employ hundreds of thousands of people and take on tons of risk, all to make these products and services that I use every single day. How dare they do all these things and make tons of money, more money in a day than I'll make in my lifetime? I did the math. Jeff Bezos earns like $3,000 a second or something like that, something like $300 million a day. That's more money than I can comprehend. And for that, I hate them. And I'm kind of joking here, but you get the point. Like, billionaires make easy punching bags because billionaires make tons of money. They have things that they are doing that they shouldn't be doing. They have things that they're not doing that they should be doing. And then they're in the public spotlight because they have so much damn money. So instead of just pooping on them like most people do, I actually want to talk about what we can learn from billionaires. And I want to take this video to talk through 5 different billionaires with like a combined net worth of like $700 billion and give you 1 to 2 takeaways from each of these billionaires that you, as a solo business owner or solo freelancer, just sitting in your home office or your home studios, getting work done every day. What can you learn from these people? There's things that billionaires do that the common pleb small business owner or the common pleb freelance business owner isn't doing. And so this video is going to tackle some of the things that I think that we can learn from billionaires as small business owners. All right, so the first billionaire on our list, coming in at a net worth of $101 billion, my mind is blown, is Warren Buffett, the boring old white dude with gray hair who's like 1,000,000 years old. And you may have heard the name, you may be familiar with what he does, but he's relatively quiet. And this is actually one of the first virtues that I think that we can learn from of all the billionaires on this list, is that Warren Buffett is incredible at just being boring. Slow and steady wins the race. That is the whole mantra of Warren Buffett. And if you've ever read his like insanely thick biography that came out years ago, it's like a 39-hour audiobook if you listen to it. I don't know how big the actual physical book is, but it's probably like that thick. Anyways, if you read that, it's called Snowball. And it just talks through his childhood from starting to deliver papers all the way to eventually owning like 30-something newspapers throughout his life. He started from very small, humble roots and grew it to the $101 billion fortune that it is today. And the secret is just being boring, being okay with the mundane and sticking to what you know. Whenever the dot-com bubble happened in the year 2000 or around the 2000s, he wasn't participating in that. And people were ridiculing him for that by being out of date and not being on top of what's new in the world and what's trending in the world. Instead, he just says, I'm going to stick with what I know. I'm going to be boring, basic, old Warren Buffett. I think he was born an old man, by the way, and just keep chugging away at what I know. So as freelancers and small business owners, I think we can learn a lot from this sort of approach because he just puts his head down and doesn't let shiny objects distract him. I don't know how many times in my life and probably your life that we've been distracted by these shiny objects that pop up, things that we should be trying out, things that we should be doing, other opportunities we could jump on, other things we could be doing in our businesses that are really just distractions instead of chugging away day after day, a little bit of a grind, not too much grind, by the way. I don't believe in that kind of mantra, but a little bit of grind, just doing the things that you know work every day. I struggle with this to this day of just being slow, steady, boring, basic Brian and doing the things that I know work. So I think we can learn a lot from Warren in regards to that. The second thing that I think we can learn from Warren Buffett is simply just living well below your means. This is a photo of Warren Buffett's house. Someone who's worth $101 billion. I personally know people that are not even millionaires that have more impressive looking houses than that. And it's because Warren is not distracted by like fancy stuff. Yes, he spends money. Yes, I think he probably has a jet that he begrudgingly bought years and years ago just for the reasons of like getting around places faster because his time is valuable. But I think for like years, he drove like a Ford Taurus or something boring. He goes to like McDonald's every day. He's just a boring, basic dude. And he does a better job of living within his means or below his means than probably anyone else. I think his house is like 0.1% of his net worth, if even that. A danger we fall into as small business owners is we start building our businesses, we make a little bit more money, and then we do this thing called lifestyle creep. It's when you buy more and more stuff or move into a bigger house or get a better car or you incur debt or just start buying fancier meals or going out more, going on more trips, spending as much money as you're making. So no matter how much you make, you're always spending that much. And I think Warren's a good example of just putting your head down, doing what you know works every day, going back to the slow and steady approach that he's been doing his entire life, and living below your means so that you're not spending every single dollar that you make. He invests wisely. That's his entire thing. As business owners, we don't have the benefit of steady income. Usually it's ebbs and flows, ups and downs. We have good years, we have bad years, we have good months, we have bad months. And because of that, if we let that lifestyle creep keep going up year after year, then all of a sudden something could drop out. We could lose a part of our business. COVID could happen. 2020 could come again. And all of a sudden our income drops and we're in this lifestyle that we can no longer sustain. So that's why I think living well within your means is something that we should all take from Warren Buffett and plenty of other successful examples of business owners out there who live well below their means as a way to just safeguard our businesses as self-employed people. We don't have things to fall back on typically. We don't have a steady paycheck we depend on every month. So living below your means is just a smart business practice. All right, evil billionaire number 2, Bill Gates, worth an estimated $131 billion with a B. Good God, 131 billion. Bill Gates, you probably know who that is. I don't have to explain this to you. He owns Microsoft and he does a lot of other stuff. When I was researching him, I found one interesting tidbit that I think is such a great example of something we can take away from as small business owners and freelancers, or whatever you consider yourself, is that you should become your own boss ASAP. I'm going to read you a quote from him. I don't know if this is an accurate quote, but this is what I found on the internet. If you don't build your dream, someone else will hire you to build theirs. Think about that for a moment. Whether that quote's accurate or not, think about that for a second. Anytime a business hires you, someone founded that business. Someone is hiring you to build their dream, to build their business. So that's what a job is. So the sooner you can leave that to build your own business so that you're day in, day out building something that is your own passion, your own business, the faster you'll have the progress to eventual full-time. That doesn't mean you have to leave your day job, but that does mean you have to start as soon as you can on building it as a side hustle. Now, Bill Gates is a freak of nature, so I'm not going to really compare you to him, but Bill Gates dropped out of Harvard, of all schools, Harvard, which is like in the 70s, that's unheard of, because he wanted to start Microsoft. He saw this new trend where millions of people were now getting this position where they could actually afford personal home computers. This was like the technology was finally making that shift, and he wanted to be a part of that wave. He didn't want to be the person that missed that wave, so he dropped out of Harvard to pursue this. He knew that if he missed this wave, he would regret it forever. So he did this. He obviously built a successful business, and now $131 billion later, he is what I would consider successful. So should you drop out of college? Should you quit your job? That's not for me to determine. That's not for me to say. But I do think that whatever you need to do to start that business, to start that thing ASAP, I think this is a great takeaway from Mr. Bill Gates. Evil billionaire number 3 is Mark Zuckerberg, coming in at a huge $133 billion net worth as of the time that I make this video. And by the way, he's also a college dropout, so that he has a little something he shares with Bill Gates. So here's the trait that we can take away from Mark Zuckerberg, and I think he embodies this perfectly. Be willing to fail. Here's a quote from Mark Zuckerberg. He says, "The greatest successes come from having the freedom to fail." Like I said, Mark Zuckerberg is the perfect embodiment of this sort of trait, being willing to fail, because Mark Zuckerberg has some of the most public-facing failures of any of the billionaires that I could come up with on this list. Some of his failures, I'm just going to read the list here. Cambridge Analytica, back whenever all the scandal happened with this data, all the big data stuff that came out. He himself, he's basically a meme now. So like if you look at the memes that are on the screen now, like this dude is just a joke to many, many people. And then also Facebook started off in the very beginning in a massive lawsuit. If you watch the movie, The Social Network, there's actually a $65 million settlement with the Winklevoss twins that was like from the inception of Facebook. So it's started in failure. It goes through constant failures, but it is not a failure. There's a big difference between failing and being a failure. Being a failure is the person who avoids failure their entire life, so they never take action, they never do the things because they're always trying to avoid failure. Failing is just a natural byproduct of living your life. You will always fail as long as you're trying to do anything. If you're not failing, you're not trying, you're not pushing yourself, then that's a great recipe for stagnation, for sadness, for depression, for really no progress in life. We all tend to avoid taking any sort of action, especially when it comes to being your own boss, going back to Bill Gates' trait. When it comes to being your own boss, we avoid any sort of action because we are trying to avoid failure. So no matter what you do, keep in mind that you will never fail as publicly as Mark Zuckerberg. Evil billionaire number 4 is Elon Musk, coming in at a hot, blazing $160 billion net worth. Like, what the hell? So Elon Musk, you've heard of him. Like, if you haven't heard of him, you're living under a rock. He's like the internet child of prodigy of the world. Like everyone seems to love him on the internet. I mean, plenty of people hate him, but as far as like internet memes and that sort of stuff, it's hard to find bad memes for Elon Musk because so many people love him. He's like this weird, relatable billionaire, which is rare. But there's one trait that I really want to focus on with Elon Musk because he embodies this more than any other billionaire that I could find. And that is he does not care about probabilities. He cares about possibilities. Think about that for 1 second. He doesn't care what the probability of something being achieved is. All he cares about is whether or not it is technically possible. So I was reading his biography, or the one by Ashley Vance, and he was talking about at the end of that book how, I mean, there's tons of examples throughout this book, but there's at the end of the book, he talks about how they're preparing to eventually land a rocket back on the Earth after launching it. At the time, this had never been done. At the time, this was thought to be nearly impossible. It was a huge technological hurdle, but Elon Musk had figured out that it was technically possible. He didn't care about the probabilities. He just cared that it was technically possible at all. It was physically possible. And then he put the people, the team, the processes, the money into place to make sure that that could actually be created. And now we see all the time, it's like a common thing. You will launch a rocket into space and then safely land it back down on the pad. It's just over and over again. And I think they have rockets now at this point that have been launched dozens of times. And that's a huge part of why they're successful at SpaceX. Because back in the day, when you launched a rocket into space, you would just eject it to Earth and let it crash into the ocean. And that was the one time you got to use that rocket. So Elon Musk has done this time and time again. He did this with the Boring Company, which is his like underground tunneling thing. He's like, is this possible for me to tunnel underground so I don't have to sit in traffic? And he found out it was technically possible. So he went through, he built a team, he built a company, and now they're boring tunnels under the earth. He did it also with Tesla energy battery packs. These are these big battery packs that you can run your entire home off of. People said over and over again that the battery technology wasn't capable of powering an entire home off of a battery pack. And then he did the research. He consulted with his team. He found out that it was technically possible if they did certain things, very difficult, not a high probability of success, but it was technically possible. And as long as he knew it was technically possible, he would do whatever he could to actually make sure it was done. As solo business owners, we have this bad habit of just simply looking at the bad numbers. What is the probability of failure? Not the probability of success, not whether it's possible, just the probability of failure. And I want you to do this quick exercise. What do you think the failure rate of a new business is within 5 years of starting that company? Like without ever looking it up, just top of mind, what is the failure rate percentage-wise? Like how many percent of businesses fail within the first 5 years? When I first thought this up, I was just thinking like, hey, I'm going to put this number down because it's a high failure rate. 9 out of 10 businesses fail within the first 5 years. And I was going to use this as an example of like, hey, who cares if you're the 10% or the 90%, focus on the possibilities, not the probabilities. But the reality is only 50% of new businesses fail within 5 years. 50%. So you really have a half and half chance of still being open 5 years from now if you start a new business. And I thought that was fascinating. We tend to overestimate the possibility of failure and underestimate the possibility of success. And even if the tables were turned where it's 90% chance of failure and 10% chance of success, Elon Musk would simply say, oh, that 10% chance of success, that means it's technically possible. So I'm going to go all in. All right, so it's time for the final and fifth evil billionaire. And that is, of course, Jeff Bezos with $209 billion net worth. I couldn't have a list of evil billionaires without him because he's literally like Dr. Evil. If you've looked up memes on him online for Dr. Evil, there's been plenty of comparisons. So there's no lack of reasons to hate Jeff Bezos, but I want to focus on the positives here. What are the traits that we can take away as small business owners that we can actually implement in our businesses? And there's one that I think he exhibits more than any other entrepreneur that I've ever heard of. And that is something called his regret minimization framework. Only he could make something so nerdy sounding. So here's this framework. It's essentially this: in blank years, will I regret not doing this? So think about that for a second. In 10 years, will I regret doing this, or will I simply regret never taking the chance? Here's a quote from him from an interview. He says, I knew, this is referring to Amazon.
So I wanted to project myself forward to age 80 and say, okay, now I'm looking back on my life. I want to have minimized the number of regrets I have. And you know, I knew that when I was 80, I was not going to regret having tried this. I was not going to regret having trying to participate in this thing called the internet that I thought was going to be a really big deal. I knew that if I failed, I wouldn't regret that. But I knew the one thing I might regret is not ever having tried. And I knew that that would haunt me every day.
Just for some context here, This was like in the 90s. Jeff Bezos was the youngest senior vice president at some major investment firm. So he was making probably a significant amount of money. He had major golden handcuffs because he had a yearly bonus coming up. And instead of sticking around to get that big yearly bonus for his golden handcuffs plus his salary that he's already collecting, he decided to leave that cushy day job, skip the annual bonus, and go start Amazon. And he did it because of this regret minimization framework. And I guarantee this is the same mental model he used when he was considering going to space in his rocket. So which one would he regret more? He thought, would I regret more sending someone else to space in my rocket and me not being there? Or would he regret going to space and the ship blowing up and him dying? So in his mind, he knew that 10 years from now, he would absolutely regret sending someone else to space and him not being able to participate in that. So here's the other unintended benefit of following Jeff Bezos' framework is it is guaranteed to transform your look if you just follow your dreams. So really one of the commonalities for all of these traits that I talked through, it has some sort of element of fear involved. With Bezos, the regret minimization framework, he is overcoming fear by thinking about his future self, looking back on the decision he makes. In the future, if I made the decision to avoid this thing, avoid launching my own business, how much would I regret that? And he thought, I would regret it immensely if I was just a corporate slave for the rest of my life. Even Elon Musk's trait, where he's looking at possibilities instead of probabilities, he's avoiding fear. If he looks and says something is technically possible, then I'm willing to fail and I will pursue that wholeheartedly, even though the probability is low that I'll actually make this happen. It's the same with Mark Zuckerberg, being willing to fail. That's overcoming a fear of failure. Most people, this is the number one thing that holds them back as business owners and entrepreneurs is the fear of potentially failing and looking dumb, or failing and going broke, or failing and just hitting that ego that's buried deep within us. That's a hard thing to overcome. So there you have it, 5 evil billionaires and traits that you can take away from them and then apply to your own life and in your own business. Now, before I wrap this video up, I got to leave you with something that's going to be a helpful tool if you're trying to make that leap into full-time freelancing or any sort of service-based business. If you are about to launch the business or you already have one, and you are not accurately pricing yourself the way you should be, there's a tool that I have. It's a free calculator and a video guide that's going to walk you through how to map out everything you need to know to price your projects properly. And it's just a 3-step framework that I use in my businesses, and it's things that I've used when coaching other people on how to set their prices properly so that they can actually make a sustainable living doing what they're doing. So if you want that calculator, just go to sixfigurecreative.com/calc, C-A-L-C, or just /calculator, and you can get that guide for free.